What are some creepy urban legends? I remembered that there was this story about a secret Japanese experiment near the end of World War II where an officer voluntarily goes into complete isolation to see the effects of isolation on the mind. He can cancel the experiment at any time by pressing a button. After about a month or so, he notices the food stops coming. After a while he decides that he can deal with isolation, but not starvation, so he presses the cancel button. Nothing happens. Now realizing that he's probably trapped in his room, he starts reciting the date and place to himself to keep his sanity. He's in an underground base in Hiroshima. The date is August 20, 1945. Stranger Things is based on legends from my hometown. It's actually on the east end of Long Island. The Demogorgon, we called that the Montauk Beast, the Montauk Monster, or just the Beast. We used to break into the old Air Force Base and there were always rumors that it was never actually shut down and everything was just moved underground. It was called the Montauk Project and it's a pretty well-known one, but most people don't know about the more local parts like the Beast taking kids or why there's higher rates of twins and triplets out there and stuff like that. In Vietnam there is a type of trees that if you care for it like feed it egg and meat it will give you the power to see back in the past or you can sweet talk really well. But if you forget to feed it or don't do as it say you will go crazy or die. P.S. Sorry for the bad English, it's my third language. In Mesa, Arizona, there used to be a monkey farm that has since been abandoned. There's not a lot to do here for people under 21, so after chilling at a coffee shop, we would sometimes go spelunking through abandoned buildings. One night we decided to go and visit the monkey farm. There were a lot of rumors going around about the origins of the facility and the types of experiments occurring in the facility, from them just testing basic things like medication all the way up to mutant monkey hybrids. Some people said that the facility was haunted, because you could hear things banging from outside of the facility. Some people claimed they heard monkeys screeching. Throughout everyone in my age group, people started saying that the screeching was a hybrid that had been left behind, the facility being abandoned overnight because once it broke loose, everyone fled and never looked back. Other rumors was that it was a monkey death camp, that the staff had left the monkeys behind, which thrived on cannibalism. A literal hell on earth for primates. Years later, footage started popping up showing that there were in fact monkeys still in the facility. The local branch of Fox News dug into it and found out that the facility had been, under the radar, re-established by the University of Washington and has been in use for several years now to breed monkeys for experiments. The part that makes the urban legend and rumors much more interesting is knowing that while we were exploring, those were real monkey screams and not just figments of our imaginations. We had a legend about Purple Aki. Before the days of political correctness and possibly a bit racist as it was said he is that black that he is purple. He was meant to be a pedo who would grab lads, sodomize them and carve PA onto their buttocks with a knife. He was sort of a mythical figure, it wasn't sure if he was real. He was meant to prowl anywhere between Liverpool, Manchester and the school summer camp in North Wales where he was meant to haunt the boys' ablutions causing many to wet the bed rather than get up in the night and walk over there on your own. It was all rumour and hearsay. A pirate ghost Pegleg was also meant to inhabit these ablutions and was only marginally less believable than Purple Aki. About 15 to 20 years ago, with the internet becoming more widespread, it transpired that he actually exists and the truth is maybe even more bizarre than the original tales. The one where the girl wakes up after a stormy night alone to find her family and her dog murdered, with humans licked to painted on the wall in blood, after she'd spent the stormy night being comforted by what she thought was her dog licking her hand from beneath her bed. I'm also a big fan of the one where a man goes to a motel. When he gets there, he's told explicitly to avoid one room in particular, as it was locked and no one was allowed inside of it. Eventually he becomes too curious about the room to obey. He tries the door but it is locked, and so he looks into the keyhole instead. He sees an extremely pale woman in an otherwise normal hotel room, her back to the door and his keyhole. He almost knocks, but doesn't. The next morning, he peeks into the room again on his way to the front desk. This time, he sees nothing but the color red. Assuming that his early nosiness had been discovered, and something hung over the keyhole to block his view, he continues on his way to the desk. Still curious, he asks the lady at the front desk about the room, and on her prodding, admits he peeked into the room. The woman at the desk sighs and informs him that the room had been locked off due to a man murdering his wife there. They had both been pale as milk, with blood-red eyes. Last but not least, more creepypasta than legend, but I enjoy it. Last but not least, more of just a creepypasta. Attention, please read this out loud. Hello, Molly. If you read it out loud as I instructed, you should be safe. If you read it in your head, Molly is safe now too. In your head. The Mothman, if you see him, it means something bad is about to happen. It started in Point Pleasant, West Virginia from November 12, 1966 to December 12, 1967. Then the bridge of Point Pleasant collapsed, killing almost 50 people. There's an old legend from World War II that I've heard so many variations of, but here's the general gist of it. A group of soldiers had just finished setting up a minefield, and were getting ready to lay down the markers which would indicate the safe route through it, so that friendlies wouldn't get blown up. Before they could do that, however, they get strafed by a bunch of enemy planes. Their lieutenant, or commanding officer, I've heard the story told in many different ways, is among the dead. As they get to work on picking up the pieces, treating the wounded, etc., they hear the rumble of a truck coming towards them, and notice that the safe route hasn't been marked out yet. They realize that they will only be able to watch as the truck driver gets blown up by a mine. Suddenly, the truck slows down and starts following the correct safe route through the field, without any markers indicating where it is. When the driver gets out, the soldiers ask him, "How the hell did you get through the minefield? The route wasn't even marked." Confused, the driver tells them, "Your lieutenant led me in." "You mean that lieutenant?" said one of the soldiers, pointing at the bleeding corpse in the medical tent. The driver suddenly goes pale and says, "Yeah, that was him." "What happened?" "He was killed nearly an hour ago," the soldier replied. Confused and somewhat shaken, the driver weakly replied, "I have no idea then, maybe his ghost or something?" Before dropping off his supplies and asking to be led back out of the minefield again. The soldiers had a funny feeling that somehow, somewhere, the spirit of their dead officer was still watching over them. One of my favorite legends from my home province is the tale of Slashfoot. Except this one is heavily sprinkled with the truth, just exaggerated for us kids. There was a popular summer camp I used to go to, that used to be a normal family ranch before it was a camp. In the 60s the family hired a man, Morris, to be their ranch hand, and one day he ended up cutting his foot lengthwise with an axe while chopping wood. Since it was the 60s and he was a hippie type, he refused to see a doctor and insisted on treating it with homemade poultices and shit. That's how he got his name. The family wanted to surprise him and bring his wife out for a visit one weekend, but she ended up dying in a crash on the way. He blamed them for her death, and went legitimately insane from a combination of rage, drugs, and the infection in his foot. He made it his life's mission to get revenge on the family by tormenting them, leaving dead animals hung up by their door, killing their farm cats, all that fun stuff. They never arrested him because of how guilty they felt for everything. They actually did feel at fault for his descent into madness. He was still alive for the first 10-ish years of the camp being operational, and since the camp was run by the same family, he took it upon himself to up the ante and torment the kids that came to the camp instead. I've heard dozens of terrifying Slashfoot stories from counselors that used to attend the camp as kids, and had run-ins with Morris, too many to post here though. This one is everywhere I think. But my mom used to tell me of a story of a woman who drowned under a bridge near our house, trying to save her drowning baby. Every night at about 3 a.m. it's said you can hear her and her baby crying. If you go to investigate, she drowns you too. Probably my mom trying to keep me from going and playing under the bridge, but I was terrified as a kid. Here is an urban legend. So this 7-year-old girl lived in Russia. She always wanted to play piano, so on her 8th birthday her parents got her a little red piano. She played it all day every day. She played it so much her fingers start to bruise, remember her fingers bruising later, so they went to the doctor said it was just from her playing a lot. The doctor then followed up saying just keep playing and the bruising will stop. So she kept playing. About a week later the piano broke. There was only one person that could fix it. So the parents got her to come out to their house to fix it. When she arrived she asked everyone to step out so she could focus. About 30 minutes later she left and the piano was working. The little girl started playing again. About a week later the piano broke again. So they called out the old lady to fix it again. When she arrived she asked everyone to step out. The mom got suspicious and took a peek while the old lady was fixing the piano. What the mom saw horrified her. She saw the old lady taking out a mason jar with the little girl's blood. The old lady then proceeded to drink it. The mother called the cops and the old lady was arrested. It turns out the piano had microneedles in the keys that drained the little girl's blood whenever you played the piano. The piano was built to break when the mason jar was full. First story on r/AskReddit. Not really an urban legend, but on the way back from my grandmother's house we often see a man, early 60s, walking down the road alone in the dark. It's in a rural area so the road is surrounded by forest, and it creeps us out every time. It's kind of become an urban legend among our immediate family. Quick version of one I remember from childhood. There's a young couple driving down a country road at night. When their car runs out of gas the guy says he'll get out and walk to the town a few miles down the road. The girl pleads with him not to leave her alone but he says it's the only option. Eventually she falls asleep, and is awoken a couple hours later by the sound of a car coming down the road behind her. As it gets closer she sees that it's a police car so she jumps out and flags him down. The policeman asks her what she's doing out here and when she explains her situation he asks her to get into the car and says he will drive her into town. After they've been driving for a while she sees lights up ahead on the road, and the policeman asks her to close her eyes for the next minute or so. She asks why and explains that there was a crash and the ambulance was treating the wounded on the side of the road. She laughs it off but he insists. As they drive by, she can hear a commotion and can't resist peeking just a little. As she opens her eyes she sees a car on the side of the road, and jumping up and down on the roof is a crazed madman, covered in blood staring back at her and holding in his hand the severed head of her boyfriend. Cue music crescendo. Completely illogical, apocryphal of course, but scared the hell out of 5-year-old me. On the road I live on there is a legend of a man being chased by the cops who crashed into the swamp next to my house and died on impact, and on nights of the new moon a car covered in mud with flaming wheels will screech by the house. A funny thing about this is I once was telling this story to some kids visiting my place with their parents, and as I was telling it a car blowed out a tire and started scraping down the road making sparks. It was the weirdest coincidence. I've never been more lucky in my life. The one where a girl was driving home late one night, and a strange vehicle gets behind her and starts following her. She notices that it randomly turns its high beams on and back off several times. She gets nervous as she realizes this vehicle is following her home, so she instead drives to her parents' house. All the while whoever is following her will flash its high beams. She parks, rushes inside her parents' house, and the car pulls in the driveway behind her. Suddenly she sees a man with a knife burst out of her back seat and run off into the night. A man gets out of the vehicle that was following her, knocks on the door and explains that he saw her get into her car that night, and as she did he noticed a weird-looking dude crouched down behind her driver's seat. It was too late for him to stop her, so he followed her home, and each time he saw the man raise up behind her, he get closer and turn on his bright lights, making the guy cower back down. Obviously a fake story. But to this day I always check my back seats when I get in my vehicle alone. This story and the one about the guy with a hook for a hand always stick out to me.
I done dug into my bag of tricks, came up with some different skits. Not your average mafia, I be on some different shit. You know I'm pimping shit that make you use your mind. So if you can fill in the blanks, do it when it's time. Come on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Feel like I'm in hell, but I wish I wasn't. Yeah, you got it, now knock it while I rock it. I stick plugs in the socket and money in my. Yo, I get psychotic when you try to diss my staff.